now living in London, where he promises me the weather is a great deal better. In fact, I'm sure that Canadian weather today is better than South African weather outside, but that's a different story altogether. From Visa, the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Strategic Partnerships at that organization, Bil Gajda is responsible for Visa's relationships with mobile network operators, device manufacturers, global platform providers, and also systems integrators. He leads the Visa Ready and venture capital programs, as well as being the Samir Innovation Center in Dubai. He started out as Visa as the head of the global mobile product, responsible for all Visa's mobile product commercial strategies and also activities. Prior to that, he's worked in different industries. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Alberta and an MBA. How do you know when someone's got an MBA? They tell you. He's got an MBA from the University of Chicago. But the MBA is not the reason he's here. The reason he's flown in, literally for today, he flies back to do more business in London tomorrow. He came in specially for us at conference to talk about the future of card payments, thriving in a digital world. Would you please give a very warm South African welcome to Mr. Bil Gajda. Thank you very much indeed.
It's good to be back in Johannesburg as briefly as the trip is this time around, and I'm delighted to be here at the PASA conference. You know, I was talking to the organizers this morning, and they told me that this is roughly 50% bigger than just a couple of years ago. And that's no surprise to me, because the payments and commerce landscape is transforming at an unprecedented rate, and it's events like this where you can hopefully gain some insights, maybe not from me, but from some of the other speakers, as well as reacquaint yourself with existing or maybe new contacts that can help you figure out your own innovation strategies in the face of disruption. So what I want to do for a few minutes is talk a little bit about the payments landscape and some of the major factors for disruption that Visa sees around the world. Hopefully provide some insight in terms of how you might think about those as you develop your own innovation strategies and try to build the financial services and commerce ecosystem here in this region. And then just talk for a little bit about some of the things that Visa's doing in terms of our own capabilities and services to make sure that the ecosystem that we've built together over the past 60 years remains relevant in the face of what I said has been an unprecedented change. So of course, where I'm going to start, if I push the right button, all right. Doesn't want to move. Do I do this verbally? Next slide. I'll go analog. No, next slide. They're having trouble. I can do this whole thing ad lib if we can't find the slides. It'll be better with the slides. Oh, there we go. Yeah, we don't need this slide. Next slide. Oh, let's see if this thing's gonna work. There we go. So of course where I start is a presentation on disruption, is a picture of the city of San Francisco. I don't know how many of you have been there, it's where our corporate head office is, but I think more importantly than that, for me it really illustrates the disruptive forces that are coming together to kind of transform the payments and commerce ecosystem. If you think about San Francisco, a very rich history, big established companies, including banks, and at the same time, an unprecedented amount of innovation and venture capital and disruption in virtually every industry. I think it's those kind of factors that come together so that we're going to be forced with a bit of a collision of technologies and business models as opposed to an evolution when we think about payments and commerce. And so when I think about this recipe for disruption, go back one. Think about this recipe for disruption. There's 6 things that we think about at Visa that we think is really the driving forces that we think about in terms of building our own innovation strategy. The first, and we all talk about it, is this rising and influential millennial population. These are very, very savvy people entering very high earning years. They began their commerce lives much earlier than we began our commerce lives for most of us, and they began their commerce lives before they started their banking life. I'm old enough that I remember when I got my first $20, I went to the bank, I got a paper passbook, and I went to the bank to deposit money to get increasing balances in the passbook. I got a credit card before I got a debit card because debit hadn't been invented and they decided I was creditworthy after I finished university. Banking to commerce. Today, it's exactly the opposite. For millennials, it's commerce to banking. They have a debit card or a credit card before they even have heard of a bank, and none of them today really see the importance of banking as establishments, traditional lending models, bricks and mortar. And so the number one thing you've got to think about as you think about this generation of millennials coming up is commerce to banking, not banking to commerce. And it's a bit of a foundational shift in our industry. I think the second one is a key attribute of not just millennials, but they certainly define it, but all of us now, is pervasive connectivity. We really are always on. I'll talk about the influence of mobile in a minute, but this pervasive connectivity provides so many opportunities in terms of how you reach millennials and every other generation, but enormous challenges because we're not in control anymore. It wasn't that long ago that banks really were in control of the financial services experience and merchants were really in control of the retail environment. I can tell you retailers are no longer in control of the retail environment because of this pervasive connectivity and the behaviors of millennials. The third thing we look at is if you take a look at financial services today, and as a result of all the regulation we're facing around the world, the way that we make money in financial services or payments or commerce is really concentrated into a few buckets that are highly profitable. And many others are becoming more like utility models with very modest rates of return. And they're easily identifiable, these buckets of money, for any disruptor in our industry. And at the same time, most of us are fighting this battle, this disruption, with legacy technology stacks. Every new company that's creative is founded on the concepts of agile development, design thinking, rapid prototyping, and we just announced last week that we're moving at Visa from 2 releases a year to 6. Right? Which is heresy in financial services, and I don't know how many banks are represented here, a lot of you, how many of you are doing 6 releases a year on your core systems? Yeah. So this is the challenge, our legacy technology stacks that we're fighting this disruption with. In addition, a lot of the services that we drove value from in the past have become commoditized. And it's driven by a focus on user experience instead of product. If you think about Uber, and I'll come back to it, public transportation has been around for 3,000 years. The product is not new. Uber went at it completely from the customer journey and redesigned the interface for a 3,000-year-old technology and completely transformed transportation in every market it's hit. So again, we're fighting against companies as an ecosystem who start with the user experience and commoditize the product. And we are still busy, most of us, with a very product mindset and building the next generation or the next release of a product, as opposed to that next generation of customer experience. And so if you look at all of these factors together, it is a recipe for disruption and hopefully a call to action in terms of how we need to think about the evolution of commerce. See if this one works. All right, next slide. Are we able to get the next slide? All right, I'll just do the voice track and hopefully the slide will catch up. They're not advancing. So then when we think about, so at the center then of disruption, and I talked about it earlier, is the ubiquity of mobile. More than 8 billion mobile users. It's still growing at around 1,000 a minute. It is the world's first ubiquitous technology. It's disrupted every adjacent technology it's hit, whether it's messaging, enterprise software, music, gaming, and of course it was inevitable it was going to completely disrupt commerce. It's taken longer because it's your money, it's not a ringtone or a message, but we're now watching mobile become at the center of this commerce disruption. The challenge, again for us, isn't to drive people away from cash and check to digital technology with mobile at the center. We're watching that happen at an unprecedented rate. The challenge, of course, for us is to remain relevant as an industry as we watch that happen. And what we did, oh, there's one before that. Can we go one back? Oh, they're missing a slide. Oh well, that's okay. So what we've done then as an industry, and what we'll see at the center of not just mobile, but the Internet of Things all the connected devices that we'll talk about, payments in the cloud, is we developed as an industry, not Visa, MasterCard, Amex together, what you're going to hear a lot about over the next 5 to 10 years is tokenization. We've wanted to innovate as an industry for the next, over mobile as an example, for the past 5 to 10 years, but every innovation that came to us required us putting a credit card, a card number, in a device, and put all that systemic risk into the ecosystem. A device is lost, a device is stolen, a device is cloned, and it's not just that device that's compromised, the plastic has to be replaced. Every place you put that card on file in an e-commerce experience has to be changed. Customer service calls, declines, etc. So we weren't willing to innovate at the pace that technology was going to allow us to. And then we invented tokens. So the ability to have a card as the master account and to have virtually an unlimited number of tokens assigned to devices, to mobile in the cloud, on databases, and have that token combined with that device or that service, being able to provision, manage, canceled, re-provisioned instantaneously over the air, and to maintain the integrity of that master account allows us to think very differently about how we innovate. I'm not worried about putting a token in a car to enable car payments, or into a robot, or into your washing machine, or in the cloud, because I can bind that token to that service. It'll never harm the master account, and I can think very flexibly about how we use that token in a payment experience. I know that many banks here are already looking at our token service as they roll out their HCE or PayWave or even other partners' wallets, and you'll hear a lot more about it. But I think tokenization is going to be transformative in terms of how we innovate and think about payments. Next slide. So again, when I think about this pervasiveness of operating systems and devices, and it's not the mobile network operators that are driving innovation in mobile anymore, it is operating systems and devices. We think about building solutions that are centered around the major operating systems, Apple, iOS, and now Android or Amazon OS. Our tokens service at the center of it, and then enabling every last mile that you want to put onto the payment system, whether that's PayWave using NFC or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or cloud-based solutions. We need to be there with flexible solutions as you can build out your own innovation strategies. The next operating system and the big disrupting factor that we look at is messaging. If you take a look at what's happening with millennials and really how they're communicating and where commerce is going to find them, it's on these global and emerging messaging platforms. 900 million active Facebook users every month. We chat 150 billion messages a day. They think about themselves as operating systems, and they are already starting to launch payment services inside that very live and dynamic messaging experience. So as financial institutions or partners of the industry, when you think about how you're going to reach millennials, how you're going to drive your services, it really won't be by directing them to your website or even directing them to your mobile app. It's going to be by taking your capabilities and your services and driving it through the message platforms. And we're already starting to see this today. Next slide. So if you look at the reasons why messaging has become so pervasive for millennials and every generation that will follow, it's because it's hardware agnostic. It works on any device and it follows you across devices, big screen to small screen. It's on wherever you're connected, and it travels with you wherever you go. The successful platforms have gamified the experience to provide that emotional connectivity in addition to all the functionality that messaging provides. It's extremely personal. You can design and redesign your contacts and your experience across different messaging platforms, whether they're SMS-based or photograph-based or location-based. Already we're starting to see through QR code technology and others, payment capability, but also capture capability to support the advertising and marketing models inside messaging. And of course, you're connected to your contacts, to your network, to the people that you want to be in touch with through this messaging platform. These attributes make it a very powerful platform for banks as well as the disruptors, and we're already, as I said, we're already starting to see some of this in here. Next slide. These are just a couple of examples. One is Toronto Dominion Bank. For those of you that don't know, it's a very large bank in Canada and the United States. They've started taking a lot of their mobile banking capabilities and customer service capabilities and driving them through the major messaging platforms. So again, don't go to the TD app, don't go to the website. We're going to find you in your environment, push our new service, advanced messaging and alerts. These are the services that I think banks should be looking at, is how you take the same services you provide, balance notification, paying bills, advice on new services, incentives, loyalty, and driving them through platforms that are relevant to them today, as opposed to just thinking about your website or your app as a destination. And by the way, you have to do that too. And the other example here is just KLM, that again is even delivering QR codes and boarding passes inside messaging platforms. Next slide. So again, when we think about at Visa how we address the messaging players, part of our group is strategic partnerships. We're in active discussions to develop commercial relationships with Facebook and all the major messaging platforms to encourage them to work within the existing model, use our very successful debit and credit rails to drive the commerce experience, and we'll continue to do that. And as well, develop new capabilities. So as commerce is developed across messaging platforms, we have things like fast funds. So that if you can send a message in 2 seconds, you should be able to get paid in 2 seconds as well. And how do we develop that technology across the ecosystem to make sure that our capabilities match the expectations that people have in terms of these messaging platforms? Next slide. The third theme I want to talk about, and I think Nancy from MasterCard talked about it this morning, was the Internet of Things, connected devices. I think she said 30 billion. I'm going to use maybe a slightly inflated study that talks about 50 billion connected devices by 2020. So on the one hand, then, if we see the millennials driving the way that humans interact with commerce and their existing platforms and payments, we're now going to bring the machines into it. And whether you're looking at things like connected car, what's happening in augmented reality, what's happening with white goods, or even some of the innovations that are happening around the ATM, this has already started to happen. And so we all need to think about IoT and how we take advantage of an enormous opportunity, because by definition, these devices that are connected aren't using cash and check. They should be benefiting from the ecosystem that we built. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about the Internet of Things. Next slide. Oh, back one? There we go. So when we think about the Internet of Things as a theme, again, we think about using this connectivity and this machine learning and this machine connectivity to take the consumer and augment their experience. How many people here have seen some of the more recent virtual reality or augmented reality capabilities, whether it's through Samsung or others? We're looking at these and others as a way to bring the entire retail experience, into your house. And if you look at what companies like Samsung or Amazon or others are doing it, they're going to be developing and launching these services within the next 6 to 12 months. This is not far off. We're also looking at, of course, all these connected devices. The one we're focusing right now on primarily at Visa is the connected car, not because we think it's necessarily even the most important connected device, but it's one that we think benefits from all of these machine-to-machine capabilities and can, through machine connectivity, change actually a very human experience. Whether it's the way that you park, or buy fuel, or pay for gas, pay at a quick service restaurant, or pay for a toll, lease a car, buy insurance. And so we're going to continue to work on these use cases that really demonstrate the capability of machine learning and the connectivity of things as another theme in terms of our innovation strategy. And I think that it's wise for us all to be thinking about this as a factor over the next 3 to 5 years. Next slide. As I said earlier, though, we already have in this industry an early example of a machine that I'm already seeing some innovations on in terms of Internet of Things. If you take a look at the plain old ATM Very efficient distribution, 24/7, highly automated, no human intervention. It's got a number of sensors, and we see the number of sensors added already. We know that there are ATMs that are doing NFC payments. We're already seeing biometric trials at ATMs, and these are connected, of course, to our core systems. And so I'd say, as a financial institution or an ecosystem, if you want to look at some early innovations where we can use machine learning and machine interactivity to drive a different consumer experience, I think it's around the ATM, and it's another focus of ours. Next slide. So when we think about the Internet of Things and what it's going to take as an ecosystem to really take advantage of that opportunity, it is around, again, tokens in these devices, not our card numbers, so we can securely launch new and innovative services. It is around improving our familiarization and our services around beacons and sensors, being able to identify these 50 billion devices and make sure that they interact in a commerce way, making sure that you have your control over your devices, that there's an easy way to go onto your app, your mobile banking app or some other app, and look at all the devices that you're controlling and change configurations and change your payment credentials and remain in control. And then, of course, looking at other services like geolocation and ID&V. Next. All of us, in order to do this, have to think very differently about the systems we've created. For 60 years, we were very secure and very robust because it was essentially a very large, close network connecting Visa license holders with very big pieces of IBM, Iron, and Cisco routers to 40 million merchant endpoints. Right? In order for us to do all of the innovation that we need to do, we need to expose that closed network. Visa's created a Visa Developer Center very recently, so for the first time, we've taken our core capabilities and created APIs around them so that our banking partners and the partners you use can innovate around our core payment functionality. I know most of you are already thinking, if you haven't already developed your own sandboxes, your own APIs, your own SDKs, your own developer programs, trying to build your own developer communities. None of us can do it fast enough. Right? Because the players, if you that first or second or third slide, the players that are coming in start with APIs and SDKs. They don't start with any legacy hardware whatsoever. Their ability to create and prototype and recreate is unprecedented. And while we still need to maintain the integrity of those core systems, we also need to create an edge to our networks to allow faster development and to allow third parties that are building these technologies to help us. Next slide. So again, when we think about our APIs, you know, it's not going to be the garageist who's able to access the Visa network and start playing with payments. You know, we are looking at exposing first our APIs to our large financial institutions so they can take a look at our capabilities alongside their capabilities and look at new solutions. Big strategic partners, Facebook, Google, Apple, Samsung, others, the big platform and device providers who will benefit from our APIs, and we can encourage them to use our rails instead of other rails or creating their own rails that try to disintermediate the ecosystem we've built. So we'll work closely with them. The big merchants, who again are already working on their innovation strategies and have developed their APIs, and then independent developers who are working for you. And so when we think about our development and API approach, it's very much the edge of the network. It's very much new capabilities exposed very quickly, but it's very much in line with the way we think about the ecosystem and the integrity that we need to maintain. Next. So when we look at innovation focus areas, we look at next generation issuance, instant issuance, virtual cards, to assist you in terms of how you develop your digital and virtual strategies. Next generation acceptance. You know, we know, as an example already, that MPOS, mobile point of sale, has probably added 10 million endpoints to the network over the last 2 or 3 years. It'll add another 30 million over the next 4 to 5. Square, from a standing start, those of you that don't know Square, started in the US aggregating small merchants that only accepted cash and check. They've hit 8 million merchants in 5.5 years. All of them only took cash and check before. They're number 4 on the Visa network, globally, after a standing start. and they'll probably be number 3 by the end of the year. They're still growing 30% a year, and they've really only started in the US and a couple other markets. They'll launch in Europe this year. So when we look at next generation acceptance and how mobile and other technologies can take a footprint from 40 million endpoints to 80 million endpoints in the next 5 years, that'll be transformative for us, so that's a major theme. Push payments, micropayments, very relevant in this region. For 50 years, we've had a system of pull payments, merchants pulling balances off credit and debit and prepaid cards. As we move towards a mobile-centric world where millennials want more control, it's going to be user-initiated, user-authenticated. So we spend a lot of time thinking about this. It'll change the way we think about dispute resolution and all the rules that we have as a network, but it's going to be really important in terms of building those services that are attractive for those millennials. And then, of course, the Internet of Things. At the same time, though, we're also going to innovate on the ways that we're all building our networks for today. Fraud and security will always remain paramount in the network. No one's giving up on those basic tenets of the ecosystem, and we'll continue to innovate in that area. Identity and authentication. I was in a discussion today with one of our issuer partners, and we talked about ambient identity. The fact that Uber, as an example, recognizes that people love to shop and hate to pay. So they've eliminated payment from the experience. It's ironic because for 40 years, Visa tried to make a hero out of the plastic and a hero of that moment that you put your plastic down to pay for something. And now when we think about it at Visa, we just want it to go away. It should disappear. So we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about identity and authentication so we can take it and put it in the background. And then finally, data and intelligence. A lot of the new business models we see in this space are going to be driven around data and intelligence, whether it's to reduce fraud, provide that identity and authentication, marketing loyalty services, combining with other industries to assist them because of the value of the data that we hold collectively, and so that's also another major theme. And I think all of these themes, when I think about the broad financial services industry, are probably really relevant as you think about your own innovation strategy. To finish, just to bring it to life, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds or so on 4 or 5 use cases that I think are relevant to this region, and just hopefully will spark a bit of interest and some dialogue in terms of some of the things people are working on. One of them is again, instant issuance. You know, the ability, as an example, you're on Emirates Airlines, and the ability for Emirates Airlines or another bank to provide you, or with a bank partner rather, to provide you a virtual Visa card while you're on the flight, so you can make those purchases, tie it to your loyalty point, and then may or may not send you a physical card in the future. So we've built that capability, we've prototyped it, and we think, again, in this region, that digital or instant issuance is highly relevant. Next. Next slide. Connected car. We're now in commercial pilots with a number of automobile manufacturers. Oh, go back. Now go forward. No. One more. The cars. All right, connected car. Again, we're in actual commercial pilots with the connected car right now, where we're trialing fuels, quick service restaurants, tolls, parking, and again, our role isn't to develop these services, it's to develop the specifications, the requirements, the Visa-ready certification programs, so you can decide how you want to implement it, which use cases you want to use, and know that if you do it this way, you can put a Visa token in any car and provide those services in your market. Again, we spent a lot of time on next generation acceptance as well. We see a lot of transformation and innovation around the point of sale, you know, not just multi-mode, we see that, but also providing new consumer experiences, securitizing the PIN pads or virtual PIN pads, linking loyalty and merchant offers, providing unprecedented levels of mobility, and so a lot of innovation around the next generation acceptance. Next slide. There we go. And yeah, virtual reality. As I said, if you come to the Visa labs, whether it's in California or soon our lab in Dubai or London or Singapore, you'll be able to see these virtual retail experiences. where you can literally sit and have an entire big box store or small box store journey using virtual reality and complete the commerce experience, same day or next day delivery, and really changing the way that we think about retail and physical stores. And we're active prototypes with our partner Samsung on virtual reality. Blockchain. I think you've got a speaker coming up next. It's going to talk about blockchain. We spend a lot of time thinking about blockchain, and I know that a lot of our banks do as well. We made an investment in a company called Chain that I think has got a very kind of blockchain 3.0 approach to the problem. We're now looking for bank partners for a commercial pilot to use blockchain and Visa to do interbank transfers and international merchant transfers. So again, Visa's great at connecting endpoints, that last inch. We've got this great big bank ecosystem, but if you take a look at how hard it is for a merchant in this country with this currency to pay a merchant in that country with that currency, the cost and complexities of interbank transfers, correspondent banking, we think that we can reduce this both in terms of time, complexity, and cost for everybody in the ecosystem. And so we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about how actually blockchain and chain technologies don't threaten us as an ecosystem, but actually maybe enhances the kind of services and reduces the cost of some of those services. And then finally, last slide. I think there's one more. Again, this whole idea of identification and authentication, and at the center of it for us today is biometrics. So all of us, I think, have experienced biometrics, using fingerprints, whether it's airports or other. We've now developed payments by your iris, facial recognition of your gait. So the idea that when you come into the coffee shop and you've registered with the program, that we've authenticated you 600 or 700 times in 2 or 3 ways before you get to the coffee, so we know it's you. And so where we want to get to, and we were talking about this earlier this morning, is we really do want to put payments into the background where we're using everything we know about a person, the devices they have, where they are, what they've done in the past, their physical characteristics, to identify them and provide our banks with really reliable risk-based models to put payments in the background so you can focus on providing commerce and not payments to your customers and enhance your own banking and retail environments. So at a very high level, that's kind of some of the things that we see at Visa, some of the things that we're working on with you, and hopefully some of the things that you're thinking about as you build your own innovation agendas. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions.
And Bill, before I thank you indeed, let's take 1 or 2 minutes of questions, ladies and gentlemen. We'll dispose of the PowerPoint for now, proving that we can continue a live presentation in full flow. Do you have thoughts and questions? We'll bring live working microphones into the audience now for you as well. So please just wave if you will, and we'll see where we've got questions coming in for you. Whilst we're looking at those, Bill, the thing that intrigued me, you talked about the last inch. Is that the space that Visa believes it wants to operate in now? And how would you define that last inch?
Yeah, I would say that...
Microphone in the front over here, please.
Visa's a bit agnostic about the last inch. So we think about NFC, we develop standards for that. I know that QR codes are quite popular here in South Africa, and we provide a token service for people that want to put tokens in terms of QR codes. We've just written a standard for Bluetooth because we think IoT and cars may talk to each other using Bluetooth as a last mile, Wi-Fi, some cloud-based solutions. Visa's agnostic about the last inch as long as we can ensure that it's secure, and I think that tokens goes a long way to do that. So I think that one place Visa is going to play is that last inch, but really where we play is that network connectivity, and the last inch at the same time.
Awesome. If there's time, I have one other, but we have a question on the front row. Yes, please, sir.
Hi, thanks a lot. That was really interesting conversation there. I'm curious as to what you see with all of these faster payments coming into play. So we've seen MasterCard take a position in that space. But do you see the opportunities that you've got, and the market that you have, are you seeing that possibly shrinking? Do you see a play there? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think faster payments would be one of those innovation themes under some of the major themes that we're focusing on. I talked a little bit about push payments, and about 7 or 8 years ago, we developed the capability in the Visa network to push a payment from any Visa card to any Visa card, right? So that we kind of re-engineered the network to do that. But what we're just solving now is when we look at what's happening with the social networking and millennials and all these push models, is we have to provide that fast payment capability to match some of the expectations on the one hand, but some of these other services that are emerging on the other. And so we think that we've got the core capabilities to enable fast payments through that, what we call our OCT transaction, but we're going to develop now capabilities around that so we can play in some of those fast payment services. But push payments, especially in markets like these, are going to be extremely important. So yeah, faster payments, that's a big issue for us.
One of the things you said, Bill, was that we have to think very differently about the systems we've created. And in terms of the innovation that you're speaking about now, do you think it means the end of everything we've known and grown up with and loved?
I don't, actually. And I was actually more worried about it 5 years ago than I was now, or maybe 6 years ago, when the mobile network operators thought they were going to play in the payment space, and because they had control over the devices and the networks, they were going to decide on what was going to happen in terms of the payment network. And it's all disappeared. Mobile network operators are hardly relevant in the payment discussion in most markets. Every effort they've tried to create in terms of a competitive network has failed, and almost all the players we see in the space, big and small, Facebook to the new startup, really see the advantage of working with security and the scale and the reliability of the network that we've created. So I think that if we're smart and create that edge of the network through APIs and become flexible in terms of our business model and think about pricing, that we are absolutely relevant in this space, right? But if we don't, right, innovation will find a way. Whether it's if we don't address faster payments, if we don't think flexibly about our assets and expose them to third parties, if we try to remain a closed loop, if we keep releasing twice a year, yeah, I think that we're going to be in some trouble. But as it stands now, I'm really optimistic about the way that the players that are in commerce today talk about using the existing ecosystem.
So it's not all doom and gloom, but be aware of the innovation. Time for one final question before I thank Bill then, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, sir, we'll bring you a mic over there. It looks like two very quick ones. I'll bring you a microphone over here as well, sir. So over in the center, please, for the next microphone, but we'll take your question.
It's quite interesting that you've mentioned...
Hard to hear you, sir. Please hold it. It's almost obscenely close.
I'm afraid of the mic.
Very good.
Okay, that works. It's quite interesting that you've mentioned mobile network operators and their attempt to almost building into the financial services sector. Do you see an emerging trend being financial services emerging into mobile environments due to their dependency on interconnectivity, the connectivity of things, and their dependency on having mobile connections to facilitate some of their transactions?
Yeah, again, I spent 15 years in the mobile industry and then was head of mobile at Visa. So I actually do believe that the mobile network operator, in terms of their brands, their connectivity, some of the assets they have in their network, could be really valuable distribution partners for the payments ecosystem. And in the few cases that it's worked, it actually demonstrates that that's the case. We're at this weird place now where all those big investments that the mobile network operators made in terms of TSM and smart SIM cards has been just a profound disaster for them, and it delayed NFC for 5 years. And so I think that they're rethinking their strategies and how to play. And outside of a few markets where they've got their closed loop wallets, M-Pesa, we all know the examples, and a couple others, I think that they're rethinking how they pay in the ecosystem, because it's been taken over by devices like Samsung or operating systems like Android, or integrated consumer systems like iTunes and Apple, and they've been kind of pushed aside. I think a lot of them today are thinking around how we provide the payments ecosystem identity management services, because they know so much about their customers and they can expose it on those mobile devices in real time. So I think that there is a role for mobile operators. I hope they come to the right answer, but we're not there yet.
Cool, thank you. Do you have a microphone there, sir? If you do, please just give us the last question very quickly, if you would. My apologies.
Can you hear me?
Just hold it close.
Okay, very simple question. I do agree with you that if you can't give people access to your environments, you will become irrelevant. And the fact for me is that your Visa APIs you currently are talking about is still only for your big players you're making that available. So can we expect a change that everybody can get access to those things more speedily so that we can actually innovate around your APIs instead of trying to avoid them?
Yeah, again, I think that exposing APIs to a much broader community is going to drive a massive, but most of the innovation isn't going to work, right? Because in order to play with our ecosystem, it still requires, if an issuer to be involved, and an acquirer to be involved, and a merchant to have an endpoint, and a consumer to want to use the services. But I think that opening up our ecosystem will bring a ton of innovation that we're still going to be able to manage through the traditional models and the security requirements that we have. And so I'm not worried about the ecosystem being compromised because of the way we've structured it and the way that we'll structure these engagements. But I just don't think that the people sitting in this room necessarily, including myself, can provide all that innovation across all those technologies and all those areas as much as we need to. And so I think that we're going to have a very managed way to broaden this ecosystem in a way that we haven't since its invention 65 years ago. So I'm actually optimistic about how I see people operating their network and not really too worried about us losing control over the things that we care about, like security.
Awesome, and I think that's a very lovely way to end. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm about to give Bill a small gift on behalf of the conference organizing team, could I ask you once again to express your appreciation to him as well?
Thanks, Bill.
I'm sure Bill will take one or two personal questions as he goes out to the tea break as well, ladies and gentlemen. We have 25 minutes for tea. At 3:15, back into the plenary session, and then it's the thing that we're all terrified about. Blockchain! What does it really mean? How do we unpack it? The good news is you're going to know in the next 25 minutes. For now, enjoy your tea break. Thank you very much indeed.